My name is Elena Ford, and on the day my brother called me a liar in open court, I didn't speak a word. The courtroom was cold, too cold for May. I sat with my back straight, hands clasped in my lap, as Mason leaned into the microphone with all the smugness of someone who thought he'd already won. She fabricated her service, he declared. My sister never spent a single day in uniform. He made it sound like fact, like justice, like truth finally being aired out in front of family lawyers and the goddamn press. Somewhere behind me, a reporter clicked her pen twice. Clean, eager. My attorney shifted in his seat, waiting for me to respond, but I didn't. Instead, I stood. One button at a time, I unfastened the cuff of my left sleeve, rolled it back, and turned my arm so the light from the high windows could catch it clearly. Silence followed. Not the courtroom kind where people just stop talking, but the real kind. Thick. Heavy. Like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. There, inked just above my forearm crease, was a mark they couldn't erase. Blackguard Division 7-2. Mornfall Protocol. KIA status revoked. I didn't need to explain it. Those who understood already did, and those who didn't weren't supposed to. When I sat down again, Mason's face had lost all its color. The judge stared, and I finally allowed myself a slow, deliberate breath. 6 years before that courtroom, I disappeared. It wasn't literal, not at first. I still existed on paper for a little while. A name, a rank, a blood type. Corporal Elena Ford, United States Army, Tactical Communications. Then came Operation Mornfall, classified high risk, officially non-existent. They told us before we deployed that if it failed, no one would come looking. We thought they were bluffing. We were wrong. The mission fractured, fast ambush, radio blackout, 2 days in the dark. We lost half our unit in the first 20 hours. I was medevaced out through a side corridor of the mountains, 2 ribs broken, left leg torn up from shrapnel. They flew me straight to an off-grid facility deep in the Nevada desert, where no names were spoken out loud, and you signed your silence in blood. By the time I stood again, the war had moved on. My name had been quietly transferred to KIA status, then 2 months later, amended in a hidden addendum, KIA status revoked. Not for public dissemination. I wasn't dead, just forgotten. And in some ways, that was easier than trying to explain. I didn't go home. There wasn't really a home to return to anyway. Mason had already moved into our father's house, repainted my old bedroom, and told anyone who asked that I'd died serving my country. He made a donation in my name to a scholarship fund I'd never heard of and gave a speech about sacrifice at the Rotary Club. I watched the clip online. He cried on stage, cried. Funny thing was, when I left for basic training, Mason hadn't even texted goodbye. My father told me to come back when I had a real job. And my mother, she just nodded like she was too tired to pretend she cared. So I stayed gone. I took contract work, quiet stuff. Discreet signal intelligence for unmarked teams. A few years embedded as a ghost advisor in places I'm not allowed to name. I lived in shadows, moved between safe houses, kept my name off every lease, every phone bill, every digital trace. But even ghosts need roots. 3 years ago, I bought a little place in Wyoming. Remote, safe, unremarkable. There was a greenhouse out back and an old oak in front that split down the middle like it had survived 2 storms and refused to fall. I liked that tree. I grew tomatoes, read a lot of history, and taught myself to sleep with both eyes closed again. Then, 2 months ago, a certified envelope arrived with a lawyer's seal and my brother's name on the return address. Inside, a court summons. Mason was suing to remove me from our father's will on grounds of fraudulent military service. He claimed I'd faked my death, exaggerated combat history, and manipulated my way into veteran benefits. I stared at the page for 5 full minutes before laughing, not because it was funny, but because I realized he truly believed I would stay silent forever. He thought the Elena he buried was the only version that ever existed. And he was wrong. I didn't want the house, or the land, or the retirement account our father kept locked up in some Florida trust fund. I wanted one thing, to stand in front of him once, just once, and let the truth undo everything he thought he'd won. and the courtroom was the only place quiet enough for that kind of truth to land without being interrupted. I used to think Mason envied me. When we were kids, he'd borrow my books, follow me around the yard, pretending he cared about stars or maps or codes. But he always circled back to himself, his trophies, his spot on the varsity team, his ability to charm our father with half a sentence and a handshake. Our father was the kind of man who measured worth in volume. The louder you were, the more right you must be. Mason inherited that. I didn't. I was quiet. I asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. I disappeared into books, took apart radios for fun, memorized signal codes, for no reason other than I liked the rhythm of them. When I told my father I wanted to join the military, he laughed. Not cruelly, just dismissively. You, he said. You couldn't handle a paper cut, Elena. He didn't know I'd already passed the written assessments, or that I'd been training in secret with an old retired comms officer who lived 3 blocks down and used to run Black Ops in the 90s. I left 2 weeks later. No goodbye party, no packed lunch. Mason was busy that day, or so he said. My mother hugged me stiffly in the driveway, then handed me a Bible I never opened and said, "Just don't embarrass yourself." That was the last time I saw any of them in person until court. It's strange how grief works in a family like mine. When I went MIA during Operation Mournfall, they didn't mourn me. They polished me. They built a narrative. Mason called a local news station, told them I died heroically, holding off enemy forces to save civilians. I don't know where he got the details. Maybe he pulled them from a war movie or a dream where he finally mattered more than me. The article went semi-viral in a small-town kind of way. A folded flag ceremony, a plaque in the high school gym, even a speech from our father at the county fair. He said I died with honor. He didn't know I was alive, but he never tried to find out. He liked me more as a symbol than as a daughter. I don't know what I expected when the letter came. Maybe a note from Mason, a line of apology buried somewhere. Instead, I got 5 typed pages from his lawyer accusing me of forgery, deceit, and emotional manipulation of public institutions. It wasn't just about the money. It was about erasing me again. Legally this time. And the worst part, he probably believed it was justified. Mason had always been the one who stayed. The one who looked after Dad when his blood pressure spiked. The one who called the lawyers, signed the hospice forms, picked out the casket. He did everything right, at least on paper. So when I came back from the dead, it wasn't a relief. It was an inconvenience, a variable he couldn't control. I thought about ignoring the summons, letting them have the house, the trust, the entire damn legacy. But something about that felt too familiar. Silence had protected them long enough, and I was done being the ghost they told stories about. I didn't come back to take what was mine. I came back to burn the script they'd written without me. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. I'd been there once as a teenager testifying for a friend's custody case. Back then, I sat in the gallery, knees shaking, eyes wide, wondering how adults turned pain into paperwork. This time, I wasn't watching. I was Exhibit A. Mason's legal team was polished, all pressed suits and forced smiles. His lead attorney, a man named Will Danvers, had that rehearsed calm people wear when they think the facts are on their side. He didn't look at me much, just skimmed his notes, clicked his pen, and waited to speak like he already knew how it would end. I sat alone at the defendant's table. No entourage, no press rep. Just my attorney, Carlina Torres, former JAG prosecutor, now civilian, and me. Carlina warned me not to speak unless prompted. Let them talk, she said. Let them overreach. They did. Danvers opened with a statement that danced the line between insult and theater. Ladies and gentlemen, today is not about grief. It is about deception. My client's sister has impersonated a veteran, profited from a false narrative, and dishonored not just her family, but the uniform itself. I watched Mason as he sat behind Danvers, arms folded, chin tilted upward like he was posing for a statue. He looked so comfortable, like he believed this was a formality, a cleanup job before the money rolled in. He hadn't seen me in 6 years. And even now, he didn't look directly at me. The courtroom was sparsely filled, local reporters, a few gray-haired veterans from town, and some distant cousins who looked like they came more for drama than duty. Then Danvers pulled out a folder labeled Department of Defense Inquiry. I recognized it immediately. A decoy. This document, he said, waving it gently, was obtained through FOIA request. It contains a full personnel search. The result, no service record under the name Elena Ford, no deployment, no injury, no unit history, nothing. He let that linger. Say gasps are rare in real courtrooms, but you could feel a shift shoulders stiffening eyes narrowing. Even the judge arched one brow. Carlina didn't flinch. She simply crossed one leg over the other and said, "Is that your full exhibit for now?" Danvers replied. "Though we're prepared to call character witnesses, including Mr. Ford's colleagues, his late father's estate manager and a retired Army captain who reviewed the record and found no match for the defendant in any public military database." I didn't move, because he wasn't wrong. There was no record, not in any public database. That was the entire point. I'd been buried by the system that created me, hidden inside layers of classifications so dense even I couldn't pull myself out without triggering federal review. That was the price of surviving Operation Mournfall. After the recess, Danvers pivoted to motive. He painted me as a manipulator, someone who disappeared for years, only to reemerge at the exact time of our father's death. He called it convenient, accused me of exploiting our family's grief to claim a false stake in a hero's legacy. I bit down hard on my tongue. Mason didn't flinch, didn't smile either, just sat there still and smooth, like a man watching the last stone fall into place. The judge turned to Carlina. "Counselor, do you have evidence to rebut the plaintiff's claim?" Carlina didn't hesitate. "We do, Your Honor, but I'd like to call a witness first." The defendant. The courtroom stirred. Danvers stood. "Objection. We were not notified." The judge waved him off. "Overruled. Ms. Ford may testify." Carlina turned to me and nodded once. I stood slowly, heart steady, and as I made my way to the witness stand, I could feel the room adjusting posture, shifting notebooks raised, tension tightening like a pulled thread. Mason watched me now, really watched. I raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. Carlina's voice was calm. "Ms. Ford, were you ever enlisted in the United States Army?" "Yes." "Were you ever deployed?" "Yes." "To where undisclosed location under a mission classified as Operation Mournfall?" That got the reaction I expected. Danvers leaned forward. "That's not a recognized military operation." Carlina smiled barely. "Correct. It isn't public." "Then how can we verify it?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I turned slightly toward the judge. "Your Honor," I said, "may I present visual evidence?" He hesitated, then nodded. I stood once more, rolled back the left sleeve of my black blazer, and turned my arm outward toward the bench, the gallery, and the man who once called himself my brother. A hush fell. Even Danvers stopped mid-breath. On my skin, burned deep into the flesh through black and silver ink, was a single band, a circular emblem surrounded by hash marks and a designation code. At the center, Blackguard Div 72, Mournfall, status KIA revoked. The tattoo was permanent, specific, and encoded. No civilian artist could fake it. No non-operative would even know what to imitate. You had to earn it. I turned back toward the judge's sleeve still rolled. My name was removed from the registry because I was never supposed to come back. But I did. And this is the only record I ever had. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to, because silence was finally louder than their lies. No one moved, not the judge, not the gallery, not Mason. The air inside that courtroom felt suspended, like we were all holding the same breath, unsure if we were supposed to exhale. The silence stretched. Then a voice broke through, soft but commanding, from the back of the room. "Permission to approach the bench." Your Honor, all heads turned. A woman in full military dress uniform stepped forward, her silver service stripes glinting beneath the ceiling lights. Her ribbons were precise, her posture sharper than any blade in the room. "State your name and rank," the judge said, blinking. "Colonel Esther Blake," she replied. "Special Operations Command, retired. ID 304 and 17 Delta. Clearance Alpha 2. The judge stiffened slightly. "Proceed." Colonel Blake walked with the kind of weight you only earn by surviving more than you lose. She stopped beside the bench and opened a leather-bound folder. Inside was a sealed envelope marked with a federal insignia and 3 red bands across the top. "I'm here on request from the Department of Defense," she said. "This is a Level 3 verification of Operation Mournfall and the personnel formerly classified under Blackguard Division 7-2. The courtroom gasped again, quieter this time, like no one wanted to be caught breathing too loud. The judge glanced at the seal. "You're confirming the operation existed." "I'm confirming she was there," Blake replied, nodding toward me, "and that she's the reason I'm standing here today." The room spun for Mason. His mouth opened, but no words came. Colonel Blake turned, now facing the gallery directly. Her voice never rose, but every syllable landed like gravel on glass. "Corporal Elena Ford was embedded as tactical comms lead during the Mournfall incursion. She held the line after command fell, rerouted evac signals, and stayed behind under sniper fire to ensure extraction. She wasn't just a soldier, she was the spine of the mission." I looked down, jaw clenched. It wasn't pride that choked me. It was the memory, the sounds, the smell of heat and iron and bone. Blake continued, "When the mission was buried for political reasons, we buried them with it. Their names, their histories, their sacrifices. But one thing survived." She turned her eyes to me. "That tattoo. It wasn't just identification, it was a pact." The judge cleared his throat, visibly moved. "Colonel, do you have documented proof that this designation was approved by DoD authorities?" Blake handed over a small steel drive. "Encrypted files. Password protected. You'll need 2 keys, one is in this folder. The other is already in the clerk's office filed under sealed motion. If you match them, you'll find full confirmation." The judge nodded once. Solemn. Mason stood suddenly. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "You're all just taking her word for it." A tattoo. A woman in a uniform walks in and suddenly she's a war hero again. His voice cracked on the word again. Colonel Blake turned to face him, eyes flat. "You know what's interesting," she said. "Real soldiers don't scream in courtrooms." Mason's attorney tried to tug him down, but it was too late. The momentum had shifted. Carlina rose beside me. "Your Honor, we formally request dismissal of all claims against my client, including defamation, fraud, and misrepresentation. Furthermore, we reserve the right to pursue countersuit based on malicious prosecution." The judge didn't argue. He simply looked at me, then back to the files in front of him. "All claims against Ms. Ford are dismissed with prejudice," he announced. "Full military status acknowledged. Hearing adjourned." The gavel fell like thunder. Colonel Blake stepped closer and held out her hand. I rose slowly and shook it. She leaned in, voice low enough only I could hear. "Your file's been restored. You're not erased anymore." I nodded. My eyes didn't sting. Not quite. But my throat burned. She stepped back, saluted once, then turned and walked out. The gallery didn't clap. They didn't need to, because the truth had already spoken. Louder than any verdict, more final than any gavel. And for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't fighting to be believed. Mason didn't speak to me after the verdict. He didn't look at me either. He stormed out of the courtroom like a man expecting the applause to follow him, and stunned when it didn't. His shoes echoed down the marble corridor, too loud, too fast, like someone trying to outrun a collapse. Carlina touched my elbow. "We're done here." But I stayed for a moment longer. I wanted to feel it, this quiet, unremarkable moment, where no one was asking me to prove myself anymore. Outside, the sun had dropped behind the courthouse dome, leaving long shadows across the plaza. The wind had picked up, spring trying to remember how to be summer. I stepped onto the steps and saw them. Reporters. Maybe 7, maybe 10. Not a crowd, just enough to turn the air brittle. One held up a mic. "Ms. Ford? Do you have a statement?" I shook my head. Another leaned forward. "Will you be filing charges against your brother?" I paused just for a breath. Then I said no. A few cameras clicked. A few pens moved. But the silence that followed was real, and it was mine. I didn't walk down those steps with triumph. I walked down like a soldier who'd just buried the last ghost. The war was over. The map had closed. There was nothing left to prove. 2 weeks later, Mason's lawyer quietly withdrew from his firm. The countersuit went through, and though I didn't demand damages, the court levied fines for legal abuse and obstruction. Last I heard, Mason was trying to sell our father's lake house to cover costs. No one was buying. He sent me an email once. No subject line, no greeting, just 5 words. "You humiliated me on purpose." I didn't reply. Because I hadn't. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't called him names. I hadn't stormed out or shouted down or asked for applause. All I'd done was show the truth. And he was right about one thing. That truth had humiliated him. But it wasn't me who did it. He wrote his own script. I just stopped playing the part he gave me. Conclusion. The scar that speaks 250 words. A month after the verdict, I went back to Wyoming. The house was still there, quiet as ever. The oak tree out front stood the same, split down the center like a living scar. But this time, I didn't see damage. I saw survival. I brewed coffee that morning, black and bitter, just the way the old medics used to make it. Then I sat on the porch legs tucked under me and pulled out the only thing I'd kept from the trial, a photo someone printed for me of the courtroom. Grainy, slightly off-center, but clear enough. In it, I was standing beside the witness box, sleeve rolled up, the tattoo visible, my face turned away. No headline,